Cole Mercer slammed the cabin door against the screaming spring storm. Rain cut through the cracks like knives. His left hand shook. Old war scar. Never healed right. Then the knocking came. Small. Desperate. Again. Cole Mercer opened the door. Lightning split the yard white. An Apache child stood there. Barefoot. Soaked. Eyes wide with fear. "Please. Mister. They're coming." Riders moved somewhere beyond the storm. Cole Mercer felt the past he buried rising again. And before the night ended, his quiet life would be gone forever. Before we ride deeper into the story, hit subscribe, ring the bell, so you'll never miss another ride through the legends of the Wild West. Now, let's get back to the trail. Cole Mercer stood in the open doorway while rain lashed the yard like thrown gravel. The storm pushed hard against the cabin walls. Wind howled down the chimney and rattled the lantern hook above the table. The Apache boy did not move. Barefoot in the mud. Clothes soaked through. Thin arms wrapped around his ribs like he was holding himself together. Cole said nothing. The boy swallowed. "Please, mister. Just till the storm passes." Cole's eyes drifted past him. Into the black pasture. Lightning cracked across the sky. For a heartbeat the world turned white. Far out by the cottonwoods, something moved. Horse silhouettes. Then darkness swallowed them again. Cole's jaw tightened. He stepped outside. Rain soaked his hat brim in seconds. The boy flinched but didn't step back. Cole crouched low and studied the tracks in the mud. Small feet. Running hard. Behind them, deeper prints. Horses. Fresh. Too many for a hunting party. Cole stood slowly. The old scar in his left hand pulled tight. The boy watched the stiff fingers curl and fail to close. Cole turned back toward the cabin. "You bring trouble with you?" The boy shook his head fast. "No, sir." But the fear in his eyes told a different story. Thunder rolled over the hills like distant artillery. Cole stared at the boy a long moment. Then stepped aside. Inside. The boy slipped past him quick as a stray colt. Cole shut the door against the storm. The cabin went dim and quiet except for the fire snapping in the iron stove. The boy stood near the wall dripping rainwater onto the floorboards. Cole crossed the room without looking at him. He grabbed a rough wool blanket from a chair. Tossed it. The boy caught it clumsy and wrapped it tight around his shoulders. Steam began rising from the wet clothes. Cole set another log into the stove. Flames jumped. Warm light filled the room. For the first time the boy's face showed clear. Young. Maybe 9. Dark eyes sharp and watchful. Too watchful for a child. Cole poured water from a kettle into a tin cup. Held it out. The boy hesitated. Then took it. Both hands shaking. Cole leaned against the table and watched. The boy drank slow. Careful. Like he knew how quick food could disappear. Outside the wind slammed something against the barn. Cole's head turned instantly. The boy froze. "They're close," he whispered. Cole didn't answer. He moved to the window and lifted the curtain a finger's width. Black night. Sheets of rain. Nothing else. But the ranch dog down by the corral began barking. Low. Uneasy. Cole dropped the curtain. Silence filled the cabin again except for the fire. The boy lowered the empty cup. "My name's Thomas," he said quietly. Cole didn't respond. He walked to the gun rack beside the door. Lifted his old rifle down. Checked the chamber. The click of metal echoed sharp in the room. The boy watched every movement. "You hiding from someone, Thomas?" The boy looked at the fire. Flames danced in his eyes. "Yes, sir." Cole waited. The boy didn't say more. Rain hammered the roof harder. The dog barked again. Closer now. Cole set the rifle beside the door. His voice came quiet as cold iron. "You stay till morning." The boy looked up fast. Hope flashed across his face. Then Cole added one more sentence. "And if trouble rides onto my land tonight." His scarred hand rested on the rifle stock. "They'll find out I don't scare easy." Outside in the storm, hooves thudded faint against wet earth. Someone was already riding toward the ranch. Rain hammered the cabin roof long after the riders passed. Cole Mercer did not sleep. He sat at the table with the lantern turned low, rifle across his knees. The boy slept on the floor beside the stove, wrapped in the wool blanket like a small bundle dropped by the storm. Every so often the wind shoved against the walls and the fire snapped louder. Cole's eyes moved to the door, then to the window, then back to the boy. The dog barked once outside. Then silence again. Hours crawled past. At last the storm weakened. Rain softened to a whisper across the prairie grass. Cole rose stiffly and added another log to the stove. The flames climbed. Warm light spread across the room. The boy stirred. Dark eyes opened slow. For a moment he looked confused. Then he remembered where he was. He sat up quick. Cole slid a tin plate across the table. Cornbread. Cold bacon. The boy hesitated before moving closer. Cole watched him. The boy ate careful. Not fast. Not greedy. Just steady. Like someone used to meals ending sudden. Cole poured coffee into a cup for himself. Steam rose between them. Outside, dawn crept gray across the windows. The storm had moved east. The ranch lay quiet. But something uneasy hung in the air. The boy finished eating. Wiped his hands on his damp shirt. "Thank you, mister." Cole nodded once. Nothing more. The boy's eyes wandered the cabin. Not curious. Observing. He noticed the saddle by the door. The rifle rack. The worn boots by the stove. Then his gaze stopped on the small wooden shelf above the table. A photograph sat there in a cracked frame. A woman. Young. Soft eyes. A little girl standing beside her holding a wildflower. The boy studied it longer than most would dare. Cole noticed. His jaw tightened. The boy looked down quick. "I didn't mean..." Cole stood suddenly. The chair scraped hard against the floor. The boy froze. Cole crossed the room and took the photograph from the shelf. For a long moment he stared at it. Firelight moved across the glass. Then he turned the frame face down on the table. Silence filled the cabin again. The boy spoke carefully. "Your family?" Cole didn't answer. He poured the last of the coffee into the cup. Drank it cold. His left hand trembled slightly as he set the tin down. The boy noticed that too. The fingers did not close all the way. Scar tissue twisted across the knuckles. Old. Badly healed. The boy's voice came soft. "War?" Cole's eyes lifted. Sharp now. "How old are you?" 9. "Then you're too young to ask that question." The boy nodded. But he didn't look away. Something about the way he watched made the room feel smaller. Like he understood more than he should. Cole grabbed his coat from the peg. Pulled it on. "We checked the horses." They stepped outside into the cold morning. The world smelled of wet earth and broken clouds. Water dripped from the barn roof. The prairie stretched gray and quiet. The boy walked beside him without speaking. Bare feet now wrapped in an old pair of Cole's socks. Too big. But warm. They reached the corral. The horses shifted restless from the storm. Cole checked the fence line. Mud showed the truth plain enough. Horse tracks from the night before. Several riders. They had circled the ranch. Then moved on. The boy saw the tracks too. His shoulders stiffened. Cole steadied him. "You know them." The boy didn't answer right away. A hawk cried somewhere high above the pasture. Finally he nodded. Cole said nothing. He walked to the water trough and broke the thin layer of ice with the back of his hand. The old scar pulled again. Pain flashed across his face. The boy noticed. "Does it hurt all the time?" Cole kept working the ice. "Enough." The boy stepped closer. "My father had a hand like that once." Cole stopped. "Slow. Careful. Your father Apache?" "Yes." Cole's eyes hardened. A long moment passed. Wind moved through the grass. The boy spoke again. "He died fighting soldiers." Cole turned away. Led one of the horses from the corral. His voice came low. "My family died fighting Apache." The words hung in the cold air like smoke. The boy said nothing. Just watched the ground. Cole saddled the horse with quick practiced movements. Leather creaked. Buckles snapped tight. The boy stood still beside the fence. 2 worlds between them now. Finally he spoke. "My father said not all men are the same." Cole swung into the saddle. Looked down at him. His eyes were tired. "Older than the prairie. Your father wasn't wrong." He nudged the horse forward. Rode out toward the ridge to check the far pasture. The boy remained at the fence. Watching. The morning sun finally broke through the clouds. Golden light spread across the wet grass. But somewhere beyond the hills, riders were still searching. And the boy who stood in Cole Mercer's yard carried a past that had already buried one family. Cole Mercer just didn't know it yet. Morning settled slow over the ranch. The storm had washed the prairie clean. Sunlight crept across wet grass and broken clouds drifted low over the hills. Cole Mercer rode back from the ridge with the same quiet look he always carried. The horse moved steady beneath him. Boot leather creaked. Wind brushed through the fence posts. Nothing else. But Cole's eyes kept traveling to the far hills. Looking. Listening. Measuring distance. Thomas still stood by the corral when Cole returned. The boy had not wandered. Not even to the barn. Just stood there watching the empty prairie like a small guard posted in a world too big for him. Cole slid down from the saddle. The scar in his hand flared as he loosened the reins. He ignored it. Led the horse toward the barn. The boy followed without being asked. Inside the barn the air smelled of hay and wet timber. Water dripped from the roof where the storm had pushed hard through the shingles. Cole hung the saddle on its peg. Storm loosened the south fence. He spoke without turning. "Needs fixing." The boy nodded quickly. "I can help." Cole glanced at him. Long look. Judging. "You ever fix fence?" "No." Cole handed him a coil of wire. "You will." They walked the pasture together. Mud sucked at their boots. Well, Cole's boots. Thomas still wore the oversized socks and an old pair of work shoes Cole had dug from a chest that morning. Too large. But better than bare feet. They reached the broken stretch of fence. 2 posts had fallen. Wire sagged low across the ground. Cole began working. Hammer strikes echoed across the quiet pasture. Sharp. Steady. The boy watched at first. Then started gathering fallen wire the way he had seen Cole do. Small hands. Quick learning. Cole noticed. Didn't say it. But he slowed his pace so the boy could keep up. Wind pushed through the grass. Cloud shadows moved across the hills. Time passed in the rhythm of work. Hammer. Wire pull. Post set. Finally the fence stood straight again. Cole leaned against the post. Breathing slow. The boy stood beside him. Mud on his knees. Hair tangled by wind. But his eyes were brighter now. Work did that to a person. Made them belong somewhere. Cole wiped sweat from his brow. "You said riders were after you." The boy nodded. Cole waited. Nothing came. The boy stared at the ground. Finally he spoke. "They want something." Cole crossed his arms. "What?" The boy hesitated. Fear flickered across his face. I don't know. Cole studied him a long moment. The prairie wind moved through the grass between them. Yuling? The boy shook his head hard. No. Cole believed him. Mostly. But belief wasn't the same as trust. He pushed away from the fence. We ride to town tomorrow. The boy looked up quick. You're sending me away? Cole didn't answer right away. They started walking back toward the barn. Boots and small footsteps in the mud. You stay here till the wagon train passes. The boy frowned. That's weeks. Cole nodded. 3. The boy absorbed that. Quiet. Then he asked carefully. Why help me at all? Cole stopped walking. The ranch spread around them. Weathered barn. Lonely cabin. Miles of open prairie. The boy's presence felt strange there. Like a new sound in an old quiet room. Cole looked toward the hills again. Because riders circled my land last night? His voice was calm. But the words carried weight. They crossed my fence. The boy understood. A slow nod. They disrespected your ranch. Cole's eyes flickered toward him. First sign of something close to approval. Exactly. They reached the barn. Cole opened the door. Sunlight slanted across the dusty floorboards. He grabbed a small sack from the shelf. Flour. Beans. Enough for a few days. He handed it to the boy. You work. The boy held the sack tight. Yes, sir. You eat. Another nod. You follow rules. What rules? Cole's voice stayed quiet. But firm. You don't wonder. You don't lie. You don't bring more trouble to my door. The boy looked him straight in the eye. I won't. Cole believed that part. The boy hesitated. Then asked one more thing. What happens after the wagon train? Cole paused. For a moment the past moved across his face like a shadow. His hand brushed unconsciously near the pocket where the photograph had rested the night before. Then he answered. You leave. The boy lowered his eyes. Not surprised. Just accepting. Like someone used to moving on. They walked back toward the cabin. The ranch dog trotted out to meet them. Sniffed Thomas once. Then wagged its tail slow. Cole noticed that too. Animals knew things men missed. Inside the cabin the fire still glowed in the stove. Warmth wrapped around them. Cole placed the rifle back on its rack. The boy set the food sack on the table. For the first time the room didn't feel empty. Not exactly. But something uneasy still lingered beneath the quiet. Cole stepped to the window. Looked toward the distant hills. Storm clouds were gone now. But dust lifted far out on the horizon. Thin. Moving. Riders again. And this time, they were coming closer. The next morning came clear and cold. Spring sunlight touched the frost still hiding in the shadow of the barn. Water dripped steady from the eaves. Somewhere out past the creek a meadowlark sang into the pale air. Cole Mercer was already outside when Thomas stepped from the cabin. Axe rising. Axe falling. Each strike split the wood clean. Sharp sound in the quiet yard. Cole did not look up. He only jerked his chin toward a second pile beside the chopping block. The smaller rounds. The knotty ones. Work meant to test a man. Or a boy. Thomas crossed the yard without a word. Cole bit through the sleeves of the old shirt Cole had given him. Too large in the shoulders. Rough in the collar. But dry. Warm enough. He picked up the hatchet with both hands and swung. The blade bounced off the first log and jarred his arms to the elbows. Cole said nothing. Another strike. Same result. The third landed crooked. The log rolled free into the mud. Thomas chased it, cheeks burning hotter than the morning sun. Behind him the bigger axe kept falling in calm, hard rhythm. Then the rhythm stopped. Cole stepped over, set the log back straight, tapped the grain with one scarred finger. "Read the wood." Thomas frowned. Cole pointed. "Crack tells you where it wants to break." He stepped away again. No lesson after that. No softness. Just truth. Thomas looked closer. Saw the faint line running through the pale center. He raised the hatchet. Brought it down. This time the log split. Not clean, but enough. Cole returned to his own block. The axe began again. Two sounds now in the yard. Heavy iron. Lighter steel. Man and boy. By noon there was a stack of wood against the cabin wall taller than Thomas's shoulders. His hands ached. His palms had begun to blister. But he did not complain. Cole noticed that too. He carried the last armful to the porch and shoved the door open with his boot. Warmth from the stove rolled out to meet them. Beans simmered in the pot. A heel of cornbread waited on the table. Thomas moved toward the kettle. Without asking, he filled it from the barrel outside. Set it over the fire. Cole watched the small motion. Useful. Quick. Like he had already begun listening to the room. They ate in near silence. Spoons against tin. Fire ticking behind the stove door. Wind slipping around the cabin corners. Then Thomas looked toward the shelf above the table. The photograph was gone. But a clean square remained in the dust where it had stood for years. His eyes rested there only a second. Still, Cole saw. Cole set down his spoon. "The horse trough needs scrubbing." Thomas nodded. Shift in the air. The kind that came when a room touched something buried. Outside the sun had climbed warmer. Mud softened underfoot. The dog followed Thomas to the trough, tail wagging slow now instead of cautious. By the time Thomas finished hauling pails and scraping green slime from the boards, the dog was close enough to press a wet nose against his hand. Thomas smiled without meaning to. Small thing. Gone quick. But Cole saw that too from the barn doorway. Inside the barn, dust floated golden in the shafts of light. Cole was mending tack. Needle through leather. Pull. Tighten. His left hand fought every stitch. Sometimes the fingers refused him. Then the right hand took over. Thomas entered carrying the brush and bucket. The smell of soap and horse sweat mixed in the warm dimness. Cole kept working. Thomas began on the nearest stall. Sweeping old straw. Lifting the damp clumps into a basket. No wasted motion now. He had already learned the ranch had its own language. Do what is needed before it is spoken. The piece held for a while. Brush over wood. Leather creak. Horse breathing. Then Thomas stopped near a back peg driven into the wall. Something hung there beneath an old coat. A small cavalry saber. Rust freckled along the guard. A strip of faded blue ribbon tied around the hilt. Thomas did not touch it. He only looked. Cole's needle stopped moving. The silence changed shape. "That from the war?" Thomas asked quietly. Cole rose from the stoolie. Crossed the space between them. Not fast. Not angry. Worse than that. Controlled. He took the coat down and covered the saber completely. "Stalls," he said. "Just that." Thomas lowered his eyes and returned to the broom. But the warmth in the barn had cooled. A little later, while carrying fresh straw, Thomas caught sight of Cole outside by the side of the barn. The man stood alone facing the open prairie. One hand braced against the wall. Head bowed. Not praying. Not resting. Just holding himself still until whatever had caught him passed through. When Cole came back inside, his face was empty again. By late afternoon clouds gathered in torn white bands over the western ridge. Not a storm. Just enough shadow to remind a person how quick light could change. Cole hitched the mule to the small wagon and drove with Thomas down to the creek for stones. The spring runoff had eaten at the crossing. Wheel ruts sank deep in the bank. They worked side by side, filling the bed with flat rock. Cold water numbed Thomas's feet through his boots when he slipped off the bank. He grabbed the wagon rail before the current took him farther. Cole caught the back of his shirt in one hard motion and hauled him upright. For a second Thomas hung there dripping. Mud to his knees. Water streaming off his sleeves. Cole's grip stayed firm. Too firm. As if letting go would cost him something. Then he set the boy back on solid ground. "Watch the edge." Thomas nodded, breathless. Cole released him and turned away first. But after that, the man kept closer to the creek than before. Near sunset they returned to the cabin. The yard looked different now. Wood stacked. Trough clean. Fence line straight beyond the pasture. Smoke rising from the chimney into gold evening light. The kind of sight that made a place feel lived in. Not haunted. Inside, Thomas lit the lamp before Cole asked. Cole washed at the basin and said nothing. But he did not move the boy away from the stove. Did not tell him to eat later. Did not send him outside when darkness settled. Night came soft. The dog slept under the table. The fire painted the walls amber. Thomas sat on the floor mending a torn feed sack with clumsy stitches while Cole sharpened a draw knife near the hearth. Steel whispered over stone. Again. Again. Then Thomas looked up. "Will the wagon train truly come in 3 weeks?" Cole kept sharpening. "If the roads hold." Thomas bent over the sack again. "And after that?" The stone stopped. Just for a breath. Then moved again. "After that," Cole said, "we'll see what's left standing." No promise. No kindness in the words. But not the old hardness either. Outside, the prairie went dark by degrees. A coyote cried far off. The sound thinned in the wind. And inside the cabin, where silence had once belonged only to grief, another breathing soul now shared the firelight. The trouble arrived under a blue sky. No storm. No warning but the dog going still beneath the wagon and the horses lifting their heads all at once. Cole Mercer was repairing the chicken coop door when he heard the riders crossing the north pasture. Not hurrying. Not sneaking. Coming the way men came when they believed the land already feared them. He set the hammer down. Thomas looked up from the water buckets by the pump. The boy did not ask. He only followed Cole's gaze toward the ridge. 3 riders came over it in a slow line. One wore a deputy's badge that flashed hard in the sun. Another carried a ledger case strapped behind the saddle. The man between them sat the tallest. Fine black coat. Silver conchos on the bridle. Hat brim flat and clean despite the road. He did not look like a ranch hand. He looked like the kind of man who owned other men's hunger. Cole wiped his hands on his trousers. "Inside," he said. Thomas did not move. Cole turned his head just enough for the boy to see his eyes. "Now." Thomas took the buckets and went toward the cabin. Not running. But quick. The riders entered the yard as Cole stepped forward from the coop. Dust drifted around their horses' legs. Leather creaked. Spurs whispered. The tall man stopped first. His gaze traveled over the house. The barn. The stacked wood. The mended fence. Then it settled on Cole as if measuring the price of him. "Cole Mercer," the man said. Cole did not offer his hand. The deputy smiled without warmth. "You know Deputy Fallon?" Cole nodded once. He knew the badge. Knew the mouth under it too. Fallon had the kind of face that liked saying no when a man was desperate. The third rider swung down with the ledger case. Thin fellow. Soft hands. Eyes that never lifted above another man's chest. The tall man remained mounted. "Elias Granger," he said. Cole said nothing. Granger smiled faintly. Like silence amused him. He removed one glove finger by finger. "You keep to yourself out here, Mercer. I respect that. Makes matters simpler." Cole's scarred hand rested near the hammer on the fence rail. Not touching it. Close enough. What matters? Granger looked past him toward the cabin. Boundary matters. The words sat dry in the air. The ledger man opened his case and removed folded papers weighted with a brass clip. Deputy Fallon took them and stepped forward as if performing something official made him taller. "There's a dispute concerning your north acreage," Fallon said. "New survey filed in town. Creek shifted after winter melt. Line shifted with it." Cole did not take the papers. Fallon held them there another second, then lowered his hand. Granger finally dismounted. Polished boots hit the dirt without a speck of mud on them. "That stretch near the cottonwoods belongs to my grazing contract now," he said. "By law." Cole looked toward the north pasture. That land had been his since before the war. Before the graveyard on the hill. Before the cabin had gone half silent. "Creek don't move a boundary," he said. Granger's smile widened a fraction. "In this county, it does when the proper men witness it." A small shift. Nothing loud. But Thomas appeared in the cabin doorway carrying split kindling in his arms. He must have thought work would hide him. For one heartbeat the yard went still. Granger's eyes found him. Deputy Fallon's smile changed shape. The ledger man looked relieved, as if a page he had feared losing had turned up where it belonged. Cole stepped sideways without thinking. Not much. Just enough to place more of himself between the riders and the door. Granger noticed that too. "So," Granger said softly, "the storm left you more than fallen branches." Thomas lowered the kindling to the porch boards. He stood straight after that. Still small. Still thin. But not cowering. Cole's voice dropped. "He's under my roof." Granger took a slow breath through his nose. "I'm aware." Fallon shifted his weight. "The boy fits a description," he said. "Apache child seen traveling with fugitives south of the ridge." Thomas's jaw tightened. Cole did not look back at him. "Seen by who?" Fallon shrugged. "Men worth believing." Granger brushed dust from one sleeve. "He may have wandered into something larger than he understands. These hills have become expensive lately." Cole's eyes narrowed. "Expensive how?" Granger glanced toward the cottonwoods. Toward the disputed land. Then back. Timber rights. Cattle passage. Old claims waking up after being buried too long. He said it lightly. But the words felt placed. Like stones on a grave. Thomas was watching now with the stillness of a hunting animal. Not afraid of the meaning. Afraid of what it confirmed. Granger noticed the look. His own expression sharpened for the first time. There it was. The truth hiding beneath the survey papers. Not land first. The boy. The deputy stepped toward the porch. "Best let us ask him a few questions." Cole bent and picked up the hammer. Simple motion. Slow. The sun flashed once on the iron head. "No." Fallon stopped. Granger did not move, but the yard tightened around him all the same. The horses tossed their heads. A chicken fluttered under the wagon. Far off, a crow called from the fence post like bad news finding its perch. Granger studied Cole for a long moment. Then he smiled again. "Colder now. You were a cavalryman once," he said. "Men like you understand order." Cole's face did not change. But Thomas looked at him sharply. Granger saw that too and pressed it. Funny thing about old uniforms. They teach a man where to stand when the weak arrive at his door. Cole's hand closed around the hammer handle. The scar fought him. Still, it closed. When he spoke, his voice came low and even. "Get off my yard." Deputy Fallon glanced at Granger. The ledger man had already begun gathering the papers back into his case. He knew a wall when he hit one. Granger stepped closer instead. Not enough to draw blood. Enough to test it. "If the boy remains here," he said, "the county may decide you're obstructing lawful inquiry. Combined with the land dispute, that could become expensive for you." His eyes drifted to the barn. The wagon. The roof shingles patched by hand. Every nail and board a quiet inventory of what a lonely man could lose. Then he turned away. 3 days, Mercer. Bring the boy to town, or the papers move ahead without your comfort in mind. He mounted in one practiced motion. Deputy Fallon followed. The ledger man nearly scrambled. The riders wheeled toward the gate. Dust lifted under the hooves. At the yard's edge, Granger looked back once. Not at Cole. At Thomas. Just long enough to let the boy feel claimed. Then they rode north toward the cottonwoods and the land they had come pretending to discuss. Silence settled slowly after them. Not peace. The kind of silence left by a snake crossing a floor. Cole stood in the yard with the hammer still in his hand. Thomas stepped off the porch. "They know," the boy said. Cole looked at the tracks left in his dirt. Yes. They knew something. Maybe not all of it. Enough. He set the hammer down very carefully on the rail. Then he walked to the fence line and stared toward the north pasture where the creek flashed cold in the sun. His land. Their pressure. The boy beneath his roof. When he finally spoke, the words were meant for the empty field as much as Thomas. This was never about a boundary. Behind him the cabin door stood open. Warm dark inside. Firewood stacked. A kettle hanging ready. The small shape of a life beginning to knit itself back together. And out beyond the cottonwoods, men with law papers had already chosen where to tear it open. Cole Mercer did not go to town the next morning. He rose before dawn. Fed the horses. Checked the rifle. Walked the north fence with the kind of silence a man carried when trouble had finally shown its face. Thomas followed a little behind. Not close enough to crowd him. Not far enough to be sent back. The air still held night's cold. Grass bent silver with frost where the sun had not reached. At the creek crossing, Cole crouched and studied the bank. Fresh cuts in the mud. Boot heels. Horse hooves. Someone had come in the dark and measured more than water. Cole touched one print with 2 fingers. Then stood. They'll come again. Thomas looked toward the cottonwoods. Yes. Cole turned for home. But his stride had changed. No wasted motion now. No slow patience. He moved like a man counting what could be defended and what could not. Back at the barn he set Thomas to sorting nails from a rusted tin and went to the south wall with hammer and pry bar. One of the old outer planks had warped in the winter damp. It needed replacing. Or maybe Cole simply needed his hands busy where his mind would not be. The barn smelled of hay dust, old leather, and thawing earth. Sunlight pushed through the slats in pale bars. Thomas sat on an overturned bucket near the tool chest, separating bent nails from straight ones with quick careful fingers. Small clicks filled the dimness. Iron on iron. Cole worked at the loose board. Pry. Pull. Wood groan. The nail heads gave hard, then harder. The plank finally jerked free in a shower of splinters. Dust rolled out from the space behind it. Not empty dust. A different smell hid in it. Old paper. Dry earth. Thomas lifted his head at once. Cole paused too. Both of them heard something small drop inside the wall. A soft thud. Not wood. Not stone. Cole set the pry bar down and reached into the hollow. His scarred hand fought the narrow space. He withdrew it empty. Thomas was already off the bucket. There. He pointed low, near the sill beam. A crack in the packed dirt floor had opened where the plank came loose. Cole knelt and brushed the earth aside. The soil there had once been disturbed. Not by burrowing animals. By hands. Careful hands. He fetched the short shovel from beside the stall. Thomas knelt opposite him and began scooping dirt with a flat feed tin. No words. Just work. The quiet tightened around them. Every scrape sounded louder than it should. Soon the blade struck wood. Both froze. Cole scraped around the edge and lifted out a narrow cedar box no longer than his forearm. No lock. No markings on top. Just age. The kind that waits. Dust clung to the grain. Thomas stared at it with dark, fixed eyes. Cole looked at the box. Then at Thomas. "You know this?" Thomas swallowed. Slow. "My father hid things in cedar." Cole said nothing. He carried the box to a shaft of light near the barn door and set it on an old crate. The lid stuck at first. Then came free with a dry crack. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Under that, a leather thong with 2 carved bone pieces tied to it. Thomas made a small sound. Not fear. Recognition. He reached for the thong, then stopped before touching it. "My father made marks like that." Cole unfolded the oilcloth. Papers. Several pages, yellowed and folded many times. A hand-drawn survey map. A deed copy with county stamps gone pale. A letter written in a tight, clean hand. Cole scanned the first lines. His jaw hardened. He read slower. The sun had climbed enough now to make the ink stand clear. One name appeared twice. Then 3 times. Elias Granger. Another name beneath it. The county recorder from 6 years earlier. Then figures. A parcel line. Timber lots. Payment for transfer of rights no lawful owner had signed. Cole read to the end of the page and flipped to the map. The north acreage. The creek. The cottonwoods. All marked in a survey older than Granger's papers by several years. Cole's land line held firm exactly where it had always stood. But there was more. A shaded strip extending beyond the creek toward a stand of timber Granger now claimed. At the margin a note had been added in another hand. Protected holding under tribal witness pending federal review. Thomas leaned close. His finger hovered over a small symbol near the cottonwoods. Not touching. Just above. That mark. Cole glanced at him. "You've seen it." Thomas nodded. "In my father's pouch. Burned into the flap." Cole unfolded the letter. The paper crackled like dry leaves. This one had no official stamp. Just words meant to be hidden. A statement from a surveyor. Names. Dates. A threat implied in careful language. He had been ordered to alter the line after winter flood season and record Granger's boundary as if the creek had moved first. He refused. 2 weeks later he vanished on the road to Red Basin. Cole read that part twice. Then very slowly set the paper down. The barn no longer felt warm. Only close. The horses shifted in their stalls as if they felt it too. Thomas looked toward the open door. He wanted those. Cole nodded once. Not from belief. From proof. Another small thing slid from the oilcloth and landed against the crate. A brass token. Army issue. Stamped with a faded number. Cole picked it up. Turned it over. His face changed. The old stillness in him cracked open for one bare second. Thomas saw it. "Do you know it?" Cole's voice came rougher now. "This belonged to Sergeant Hale." Thomas waited. Cole stared at the token as if it had spoken from the dead. "He rode with me." Silence again. Then Thomas said what had already risen between them. "My father took a token from a dead soldier once." Cole's hand closed around the brass piece. His left fingers trembled, but held. "When?" Thomas searched his memory. "Years ago." He said the man was already dying by the river. He kept saying a woman's name. Cole looked up. "Too fast." "What name?" Thomas frowned. "Trying to pull it from long distance." "Anna. Or Hannah. Something like that." Cole turned away before the boy could see all of it. But not before Thomas saw enough. The wound was there. Not just war. A grave with a voice still in it. Cole set the token on the crate with more care than he had used on the papers. His breathing had gone measured. Built. Forced into lines. Thomas spoke softly. "My father hated soldiers." Cole said nothing. "But he buried that man. He said no one should be left for crows." Cole's shoulders shifted once. A movement so slight another man might miss it. Thomas did not. The barn creaked. Outside, wind moves through the thawing grass. Then from far off came a sound that did not belong to memory. A shot. Distant. Toward the north pasture. Cole reached the door in 3 strides. Another shot followed. Closer this time. Not warning. Testing. He grabbed the papers, shoved them back into the oilcloth, and handed the bundle to Thomas. "Under your shirt." Thomas obeyed at once. Cole seized the rifle from its pegs beside the tack shelf. His voice came low and hard. "From this moment, you don't speak of that box. To anyone." Thomas tucked the bundle against his ribs. "What about you?" Cole opened the barn door wider and looked toward the cottonwoods where 2 riders had appeared as small dark cuts against the afternoon light. His face had gone cold again. Colder than before. Because now he understood the shape of the fight. Not just a boy under his roof. Not just land. Buried proof. Dead men. A lie written into county books. He lifted the rifle. "They came for paper," he said. Then his eyes narrowed on the riders approaching his fence. "And now they know we found it." The riders did not stop at the fence. They slowed. Studied the ranch. Then turned their horses along the boundary like wolves circling a corral. Cole Mercer watched from the barn doorway. Rifle steady in his hands. The late sun burned low across the pasture. Long shadows stretched between the cottonwoods. Thomas stood behind him in the dim barn. The oilcloth bundle pressed tight under his shirt. Neither of them spoke. One of the riders lifted a rifle. Not aiming. Just letting the barrel rest easy across his saddle. Testing the air. Cole did not move. Silence sat between the land and the men who wanted it. Then the first shot came. The bullet snapped past the barn wall and tore a splinter from the wood near Cole's shoulder. The horses inside the barn jerked against their halters. Thomas flinched. Cole did not. He raised the rifle. Fired once. The crack rolled across the pasture. The lead rider's hat flew off as the bullet clipped the brim. Not killing. Just answering. The riders pulled back at once. Their horses wheeled toward the ridge. Dust lifted behind them. Gone as quickly as they had appeared. The prairie fell quiet again. But it was not peace. Cole lowered the rifle slowly. Inside. Thomas ran to the cabin. Cole followed seconds later. He shut the door. Dropped the bar across it. The fire in the stove had burned low. Cold crept through the room. Cole crossed to the window and watched the ridge through the narrow space in the curtain. Nothing moved now. But he knew better. Men like Granger did not test a place once and right away. They measured it. Then they returned with weight. Thomas stood near the table. "You scared them." Cole shook his head. "No." He began gathering things. Lantern. Cartridges. The small pistol from the shelf above the door. "Then why leave?" Cole glanced toward the barn. "Because they're coming back." The boy swallowed. "How many?" Cole did not answer. Outside the sky darkened toward evening. Wind moved across the prairie grass. The ranch dog began barking down near the creek. Not warning now. Fear. Cole stepped to the back door. Opened it just enough to look toward the pasture. Smoke lifted faint against the horizon. Not from the ranch. From the far field near the cottonwoods. Cole's jaw tightened. They started the grass. Thomas moved beside him. The smoke thickened as they watched. Flames crawled low through the dry weeds. Small now. But wind would carry it. Cole grabbed his hat. "Stay here." But Thomas shook his head. "I can help." Cole looked at him. The boy did not step back. For a moment Cole saw something different in those dark eyes. Not just fear. Resolve. The kind that came from already losing too much. Cole turned. No argument. They ran for the barn. The fire had begun spreading along the north pasture fence. Dry brush caught fast. Wind fed it. Cole threw a saddle on the mule. Thomas grabbed the water buckets without being told. They rode hard along the fence line. Cole beating flames with a wet sack. Thomas dumping water along the grass ahead of the fire. Smoke clawed into their lungs. Heat pushed them back step by step. Then another shot cracked through the smoke. Closer this time. The mule reared. Cole spun toward the ridge. 3 riders stood there again. Silhouettes in the red sunset. Watching. Not hiding now. The fire was only the first strike. Cole lifted the rifle. But they were too far. Too high on the ridge. One of them raised a hand. A slow wave. Mocking. Then they turned and disappeared into the darkening hills. Cole lowered the rifle. The fire still burned along the fence. Thomas looked up at him through smoke and ash. They want the papers. Cole stared toward the ridge where the riders had vanished. Yes. The flames snapped louder behind them. The fence posts began to blacken. And Cole Mercer understood something hard in that moment. This was no longer a threat waiting at the gate. The war had already begun. Night came smelling of smoke. The north pasture still smoldered when the wind died. Black grass stretched along the fence line where the fire had crawled. Cole Mercer walked the burned ground with a lantern in one hand and a shovel in the other. He turned over patches of ash. Stamped out the last thin tongues of flame. Behind him, Thomas carried a bucket and poured water where Cole pointed. Neither spoke. The prairie had gone quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that followed violence. When they finished the last smoking post, Cole stood a moment looking toward the ridge. The same ridge where the riders had watched. The lantern flame flickered against his face. Hard lines. Old shadows. Then he turned back toward the cabin. Inside, the fire in the stove burned low but steady. Warmth crept slowly into their clothes. Thomas sat at the table, the oilcloth bundle still hidden beneath his shirt. Cole noticed. "Take it out." Thomas did. The boy laid the bundle carefully on the table. Cole unwrapped it again. The papers caught the firelight. Ink faded. But still clear enough to break a man's life open. Cole read them once more. Not fast this time. Careful. Every name. Every line. Thomas watched him. "You believe them now?" Cole folded the map again. "Don't matter what I believe." He placed the papers back into the cloth. "It matters what the town believes." The boy looked toward the window. "They'll stop us before we get there." Cole didn't answer. Instead he crossed to the wall and lifted down a saddlebag. Set it on the table. Then he began placing things inside. Cartridges. The pistol. The wrapped papers. The brass token last. Thomas frowned. "You're leaving?" Cole tied the flap shut. "Riding at first light." "To town?" "Yes." Thomas hesitated. Then spoke the fear sitting in his chest. "They'll be waiting." Cole met his eyes. "That's why we go early." The boy looked down. "But they want me." Cole said nothing for a long moment. The stove popped. Wind moved softly around the cabin walls. Then Cole stepped closer. Not towering. Just standing near. "You're under my roof." His voice stayed low. Simple. But it landed heavier than any promise. Thomas nodded slowly. The room grew quiet again. Later, when the fire burned low and the lantern dimmed, Thomas spread a blanket near the stove. Cole sat by the door cleaning the rifle. Steel slid against cloth. Slow. Careful. Outside, the dog barked once and then settled again. The prairie breathed under the dark sky. After a while Thomas spoke from the floor. "My father said soldiers never protected us." Cole kept working the rifle bolt. The boy continued. "He said they only protected their own." Cole finished wiping the barrel. Set the rifle across his knees. His scarred hand rested along the wood. For a moment he looked older than the hills outside. Then he said quietly, "Your father wasn't wrong." Thomas turned toward him. Cole's eyes held the firelight. "But a man can choose different." The words hung in the warm room. No speech. No sermon. Just truth. Cole rose. Checked the door bar once more. Looked through the window into the dark prairie. Nothing moved. But he knew better. Men like Granger didn't stop once they smelled blood. Cole rested the rifle beside the door. Then blew out the lantern. The cabin fell into shadow. Only the stove glow remained. Warm. Steady. Thomas closed his eyes near the fire. But Cole Mercer stayed awake a long time. Watching the door. Listening to the land. Because by morning he would ride into town carrying proof that could destroy a powerful man. And for the first time since the war ended, Cole Mercer was no longer riding for himself alone. Dawn came gray and cold. Cole Mercer saddled the mule while the prairie still held night's silence. Frost cracked under his boots. The ranch dog watched from the porch. Thomas stood beside the wagon rail, the saddlebag with the papers clutched against his ribs. Neither spoke. Cole tightened the last strap. Checked the rifle. Then he nodded once toward the road. They rode out before the sun cleared the hills. The trail to town cut through low grass and scattered stone. Miles of empty land. Wind sliding across the prairie. Thomas kept looking behind them, expecting riders to appear. But the road stayed empty. Until the town finally rose from the dust. A handful of wooden buildings. A church steeple. The courthouse square. Morning had already begun there. Men stood on the boardwalk outside the general store. Coffee cups in their hands. Conversation slowed when Cole rode into the street. Not because of him. Because of the boy riding behind him. Eyes followed. Questions moved through the crowd like dry grass catching wind. Cole dismounted in front of the courthouse. He took the saddlebag. Looked once toward the ridge road behind them. Still empty. But that meant nothing. Inside the courthouse the air smelled of ink and old paper. Sheriff Calder sat behind a wide desk near the window. Gray mustache. Eyes sharp enough to notice every man who stepped through the door. He looked up slowly. Cole Mercer. Cole set the saddlebag on the desk. Need the counsel. Sheriff Calder glanced at Thomas. Then back at Cole. What kind of trouble walks into town with a boy like that? Cole opened the bag. Unwrapped the oilcloth. The paper slid across the desk. The sheriff read the first page. His expression did not change. But he reached for the bell beside his chair. Within minutes the room filled. The town recorder. 2 councilmen. Deputy Fallon arrived last. His boots stopped hard when he saw Thomas standing beside Cole. Then another shadow filled the doorway. Elias Granger stepped inside. Perfect coat. Clean gloves. Smile calm as ever. He removed his hat. Well now, he said softly. Quite a gathering. Cole said nothing. Sheriff Calder laid the survey map flat across the desk. Care to explain this, Mr. Granger? Granger stepped closer. Looked at the papers. His smile did not move. Old claims. Misfiled perhaps. The recorder leaned forward. His finger traced the faded stamp. That's not misfiled. Another paper unfolded beside it. The letter. The missing surveyor's statement. The room shifted. Men who had leaned comfortably against the wall now stood straighter. Granger's eyes flickered once toward Deputy Fallon. Just once. Fallon said nothing. Sheriff Calder's voice hardened. This says you ordered a boundary falsified. Granger folded his glove slowly. You'll notice the man who wrote that letter never filed it. Cole finally spoke. Low. One reason for that. The brass token dropped onto the desk beside the papers. Metal clicked against wood. The sheriff picked it up. Turned it in the light. Recognition passed across his face. That surveyor rode with Sergeant Hale. Cole nodded once. Man who vanished. Silence pressed down across the room. Outside the courthouse window more townspeople had gathered. Whispers moved through them. Granger's smile faded. Not much. But enough. You're building a story, Mercer, he said quietly. Cole stepped aside. Just enough for Thomas to be seen clearly. The boy stood straight. Not hiding. Sheriff Calder looked from the boy to the papers again. Then to Granger. You threatened land seizure over a survey you knew was false. Granger's eyes sharpened. And you're trusting a rancher and an Apache child over the law? The recorder spoke before the sheriff could. The law's written right here. He tapped the map. More men leaned forward. Witnesses now. Granger looked around the room. For the first time the control slipped. Just a fraction. Cole watched it happen. Did not smile. Did not celebrate. He simply stood there beside the boy. And let the truth finish the work. Outside, the town had gone silent. Because everyone in that street now understood something. The powerful man who had ridden into the valley like its owner had just lost the land beneath his boots. The ride home felt quieter than the ride to town. Not peaceful. Just different. The prairie rolled wide and open beneath a pale afternoon sun. Cole Mercer rode ahead. Thomas followed on the mule, the saddlebag resting between his knees. Wind moved through the tall grass like a slow tide. For a long time neither of them spoke. Behind them, the town had already begun its work. Sheriff Calder had kept the papers. Men had started asking questions. Elias Granger's smile had not returned. Justice in the frontier moved slow. But it moved. They reached the ridge above the ranch near sunset. Cole stopped the horse. Thomas looked down at the land below. The north pasture lay black where the fire had burned. Fence posts charred along the edge. Smoke no longer rose. Just the scar left behind. The cabin still stood. Barn roof shining dull in the fading light. Wood stacked against the wall. Home. Cole studied the damage without a word. Then he nudged the horse forward. Work waited. They started with the fence. Cole dug the first hole. Thomas carried the new post. Mud clung to their boots. Hands worked without talk. Hammer strikes echoed across the quiet pasture. A man rebuilding his land. A boy learning how. The dog wandered the field beside them. Tail wagging slow. When darkness came they lit a lantern and finished the last stretch of wire. The fence stood straight again. Not perfect. But strong enough. Back at the cabin the stove fire warmed the room. Beans simmered in the pot. The air smelled of wood smoke and clean iron. Thomas set 2 bowls on the table. Cole hung his hat on the peg by the door. For the first time since the trouble began, his shoulders eased. Just a little. They ate slow. Outside the night settled across the prairie. Coyotes cried far off in the hills. Wind brushed the cabin walls. After the meal Thomas stood by the shelf above the table. The place where the photograph had once rested. Cole noticed. He walked to the small trunk by the bed. Opened it. The frame came out wrapped in cloth. He set it back on the shelf. The woman and the little girl looked out into the room again. Firelight danced across the glass. Thomas studied it quietly. They were your family. Cole nodded once. My wife. He paused. Anna. The boy remembered the name. The one his father had heard from the dying soldier. Cole's voice stayed calm. My daughter too. Silence settled between them. Not heavy. Just honest. After a moment Thomas said softly, "My father buried a man who spoke that name." Cole looked at the photograph. Then at the boy. Then he showed more mercy than most soldiers ever saw. Thomas lowered his eyes. Cole rested his hand briefly on the boy's shoulder. The scarred fingers trembled. But they stayed there. A small weight. A quiet promise. Later they stepped outside. The prairie stretched dark and endless beneath the stars. The repaired fence line ran straight toward the cottonwoods. Wind moved through the grass again. The ranch breathed. Thomas stood beside Cole on the porch. "Do I still leave when the wagon train comes?" Cole looked out across the land. The burned pasture. The repaired fence. The barn where the hidden box had waited. Then he glanced down at the boy. "You know how to split wood now?" Thomas nodded. "You know how to mend fence?" Another nod. Cole's voice stayed steady. "Ranch could use another pair of hands." The boy looked up slowly. Hope moved across his face like sunrise over the hills. Cole rested his arms on the porch rail. Eyes on the open prairie. The past still lived out there. Graves. War. Loss. But inside the small ranch yard, another sound had begun to grow. Two sets of footsteps where once there had only been one. The wind moved across the grass again. And for the first time in many years, Cole Mercer's home no longer felt empty. If this story stirred a memory or two, saddle up with us again, hit subscribe and help keep these old frontier tales alive. Out here, every name, every trail, every sunset still matters. So till we meet again, friend, keep your hat tipped to the past, and your heart pointed west.